that. And we have how many minutes?
We have 43 until 11:10, so 25.
Okay. So, and then we're gonna allow you guys to explore yourselves what you think about what we're gonna talk by engaging in some conversation between yourselves. Okay, so we will start,
Yeah.
right? So, do you want to start or me?
So, hi everyone. I don't think I've met anybody here today. I taught at Lucerne Valley with Trudy's retreat last month, but I don't think anyone was there, were they? I don't think so. No. So it's great to meet you. And Tere and I have been talking about faith. It's an interesting topic because it's not something you hear about a lot in Buddhism. It might be in other traditions, you might hear about the idea of faith more, and you might even come with some ideas of what that means if you have a background in another religion or spiritual practice. And so we want to talk about that today. And what does it look like in a Dharma practice to have faith? What did the Buddha even talk about faith? And how is it useful to us? And also, how is it not useful to us and our practice? And as we talk today, I really invite you to reflect on your own relationship with faith. You know, what has it meant to you? What is your experience of faith now? As Tere said, in the meditation when she was leading, is what inspired you to come here? So we all have faith. We might have faith in things we wish we didn't have faith in, or, there's something that drives us. That's that experience of faith. And so to reflect on what that is for you, what got you on the cushion this morning, or what inspired you the very first time you opened to the Dharma teachings. And for me, faith is like an ingredient the Buddha gave us. And if you could think of the Buddha who was, an amazing teacher in how to live an awake life. And he gave many different instructions on how to do that. You could think of them in I love to cook, so different ingredients in cooking. And that when we use them, we can cook up this life where we can be more awake, that we have less suffering, where we can understand the nature of reality. And with faith, he said, it's a very important ingredient, but it's not the only ingredient. So without faith, our spiritual life can feel quite dull and dry. It's hard to get much momentum. But also, if you only have faith, it would be like just eating salt straight up, or lemon. It's like it's there to give us inspiration and lift, but not to be the only thing. And we're going to talk this morning about what we actually do with faith, how to cultivate it, and then actually the place it has amongst the many ingredients that the Buddha gave us for working with our mind and with our spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would like to mention that why we chose this topic is because we both came from kind of similar and different traditions. So I grew up in a very Christian, Catholic actually, and even a more Orthodox than Catholic one. It's another tradition. And I believed everything they told me because it was a requirement, and faith was something that you would ask God to have, like, give me grace, give me faith. It was not something that you would do or practice. It was more something that you get from outside, and I was completely taken by that, and I truly really believed that there was a God, and if I would do this and this and that was all the instructions that the Bible give how to live in this life, I was gonna get to some place in heaven. And I truly believe that, and I had really faith and hope that that was gonna be true for me, to the point that when I was even maybe in my poverty years, I don't know if you say 12, 13, I thought, well, I'm so wholesome now as a child that I learned that why do I want to get into adult life and start committing sins? I'd rather just die now and go and sit, at the next to God and just be in heaven, right? So my faith was that strong. But then, with time, I started thinking a little bit more and questioning, which is one of the ingredients that faith has in Buddhism. You have to question. It's not about just blind faith. And when I started questioning, then that's when doubt came in, which is also another very important factor in Buddhism. Doubt and faith come hand in hand. There's no way you can have faith without doubt, and there's no way you can doubt if you don't have faith in something. So then that's when my search for other truths started. I still really honor and value my tradition and respect, but then I kind of found other ways of strengthening my faiths on my beliefs. So we want to point out a little bit of the difference between belief and faith. So belief doesn't require action, right? It's just this is it and that's it. Faith in the Buddhist traditions, at least in the Western Buddhist traditions that we have learned, requires action. Is more like a verb. I've heard that I think in Hebrew, the translation for faith is more a verb than a noun. So it's not something, it's something you do, you act. It requires action. And I love the there's also not a perfect translation for the word in Pali that it's sada or shraddha. There's not a perfect translation, but it's like placing your heart upon something. So remember in the meditation I guided you to go to your mind, but then the mind in Buddhism is not the head, the thinking mind. So I invited you to go to your heart, because it's hard for us to think about the mind heart as one. We usually separate, my thinking mind and my heart, but that's just a thing that we built. It's actually, the heart mind is something that's just a one entity. So faith touches the heart. It's not about something I think. It touches the heart, and the heart leads to action. And I just want to read real quick about dogma, which in many traditions there's dogma. Dogma is a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority. And that authority is usually outside of ourselves, right? And it's an incontrovertible truth. And the difference so in Buddhism, there's no dogma, right? So why is there no dogma in Buddhism?
It's interesting. I was thinking, Tere and I were talking about the idea of dogma versus faith. And last night I was walking and I was thinking about it, and about how dogma is really obligation. It's something that you must follow, that you must do. And if you do it, you get the results. Like Tere said, if I followed this religion as a young person, I would have the result I wanted. Whereas faith, you could actually equivocate more with desire in the positive sense, is that it's based on, it inspires you towards something. It lifts you up towards something. It ignites that spiritual desire to open to something. And you could also think of it that way. It's like a heart or a mind, an opening towards possibility. And so the Buddha didn't teach in that you had to believe anything. He was actually a very practical guy. He said, what actually helps you? What helps you open your heart and your mind to understand the nature of reality? And those are the things that you can have faith in. And maybe I'll just say, unlike Tere, for myself, actually, I wasn't raised with any religious or spiritual conviction. My parents raised me with very strong social values, but not kind of a spiritual perspective on life. And so for myself, I actually had to almost start from scratch, which in some ways can be the opposite challenge of starting with a lot of faith. Maybe some of you came in and you're undoing some religious conditioning that felt like it might have hampered your spiritual life. And on the other hand, you might find some similarity with how it was for me, where I didn't have any conception of a spiritual life or something beyond the self. And so it was actually a muscle that I needed to actively develop to feel like, well, what do I have faith in? What do I sense is possible beyond the common understanding of self and mind? And to practice having faith in something, to be inspired by something beyond what I know in just sort of everyday existence.
Yeah, I remember I liked the phrase you mentioned yesterday about you come to faith either by inspiration or by desperation, right? So or a combination of both, right? So I would say for myself, in my case, it was inspirational. Like I know there's a heaven, and I even engaged in studies of how was life in heaven, if we would have bodies, if we were flying, if we would meet our loved ones or not, if we would recognize each other, like all this magical and really inspirational stuff that could be. And in a way, I had as we all experience, a tiny little unease about everything. I was happy, and I had a nice life, a loving family, but there was always this thing like, oh, there's something not totally right always. Is this gonna last? You know what I'm talking about, right? The dukkha. And then some people come to faith because there's so much dukkha that's overwhelming, that then faith comes in, and faith then is the first spark that motivates our practice. And I don't know if any of you guys were here. I don't know if it was 2 or 3 weeks ago when I talked about intention and values. So it's linked to that. So our values depend on our faith, and those together are the motivation to our intentions. And then our intentions, whether if we know them or we don't know them, if they are explicit or implicit, those are the ones who leads us to action. So it's all about practice and living in the world, not just sitting and hoping something magical is going to happen.
And maybe I just want to add there is that my experience, if we're really honest with ourselves, is most of us are led by desperation. Even if we have a great life, and the Buddha had pretty much everything. Like, he was able to try it. He was wealthy, he had women, he had feasts. He just had pretty much, like top notch what you could think when we imagine in the material world what we want. And yet he had this unease, this kind of agitation. And what happened is if you've heard the story maybe before, maybe Trudy's taught you, he goes outside the palace walls and he encounters humanity, right? He encounters the reality of humanity. You can just walk out on the streets here and you'll encounter it too. Old age, sickness, and death. And that encounter, which you could say with a desperation, the desperation of humanity, the suffering of humanity, it sparks something in him like, wait, this good life isn't everything. And I want to know what more is possible. And, For most of us, it was some experience. It might be that you actually never had all those good things. It might have been that you experienced a lot of more extreme suffering, or it might be that you experienced subtle suffering, like you got a lot of what you wanted, but you still feel like, wow, I'm not that happy. What's wrong with me? Like I should be happy, or I'm just not feeling gratified by life. And so there's something that drove you, and that is what drove the Buddha, is that he contacted suffering, and it had its place. And then from there, there's the inspiration that something more must be possible. There's got to be something beyond what I know. And um, in Sharon Salzberg describes this as bright faith, is the moment when you sense something is possible beyond what I know. For me, I was 18 and a friend gave me a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, and I had no exposure to any of these kinds of ideas. And essentially, I just remember opening it up and reading. This is how my memory goes: is you can feel peaceful washing the dishes, and I did a lot of chores as a kid, and I just remember thinking, what? I could actually feel happy inside of the things that I need to do and the things of my life exactly as they are. I experienced a lot of anxiety. And that was it's such a simple idea now, but it was so radical for me then to say, like, oh, my mind doesn't have to react in the way it reacts, and it could actually feel good and right in the situation. It could alchemize, it could work with my circumstances, and I could actually feel good inside of them. That was bright faith for me. The moment of saying something different is possible. There's suffering, but there is a way out of suffering.
Yeah. I would like to share with you what kind of inspired me to follow this path. So I heard and read a lot, and I was completely, enthusiastic. Like, yeah, there is something that I really truly believe and trust, and there's nothing I could argue against for the first time in my life, right? So I was very excited about that. So that's how Justin said, that's the bright faith, the very first faith, like when you meet somebody and you fall in love, but you basically fall in love with the idea because you haven't really known that person well. It's just, oh, they might have this and this and these qualities. They might probably gonna make me happy because of this and all my wishes, right? But you haven't really, really met them, right? So after a few maybe days, weeks, or years, you have to practice, you have to work a little bit, and then you get to know them a little bit more, and maybe your faith in them, becomes stronger, or you decide, no, it was just my imagination, this is not working. So for me, so I had really bright faith at the beginning because I heard all these teachers that they had lived this amazing lives and of happiness. And I've had gone through many traditions. Even I did a lot of psychotherapy, and I never heard any of my therapists tell me, follow this path, I'm really happy. Nobody really warranted me that, right? Or I've never heard about anyone else telling me that. So in my practice, I kind of, what I sometimes I think that happened to me is like I was sitting inside like a paper igloo, on an igloo that's not ice blocks but paper, and then someone or maybe myself just pinch a tiny little hole. So inside it's dark. I pinch a tiny little hole with a needle, and just with that tiny little hole of the needle, there's a tiny little ray of light that comes in, and I really don't know what's outside there, if there's a lot of bulbs or sun or something, but I know there's light out there. So I have faith that something out there, and if I keep punching tiny little holes, I might be able to break the ceiling and then be more with clear understanding that will lead us to freedom, to liberation, to genuine happiness. So that's what I think I felt. And it's very true that at the beginning our faith it's very exciting, and then kind of, the pinching of the holes takes a long time. Right, so you kind of, okay, I got it, but then now I need colors or sounds or brights, but yeah, it takes time and effort. So faith brings us all those kind of qualities, right? Psychological qualities that inspires us, that motivates us to start into the path, that gives us confidence. And the confidence on that kind of sets up a little bit in a relaxation mood that, okay, it's been hard. I'm not sure, but probably I'm gonna get something because I got a little glimpse of that. So hopefully in your sittings or your meditations or your everyday life, you have had that tiny little glimpse that, oh, there's probably something greater, not out there, inside here, right? That you have tapped into already. So trust and follow that. That belongs to you. That is true, and just keep feeding that. And so the faith also gives us a little bit of courage to keep trying in the path. So there's many qualities that accompany faith, but as many teachers and the Buddha said, faith is although it's necessary, it's helpful, it's not sufficient, right? So there's more to faith than only that. Do you want to
Yeah,
deepen
so
on it?
we all need that inspiration. Like Tere was saying in the meditation, oh, if you feel really heavy or sleepy, focus on your in-breath. So faith is like the in-breath. It brings energy. And if you're thinking right now like, wow, my practice, I just feel like it's a slog, like it's really hard to feel motivated to do it. You don't have enough inspiration. And so it does have a place. And so it can be helpful to reflect on what does inspire me, to look around and see people that inspire you. But also to watch the mind that wants to hop from thing to thing, because that is the problem with bright faith. It's unstable. So we're like, well, that inspires me. Well, now this inspires me. Well, oh, now I'm going to go to the gym, because that inspires me. And we all need a balanced lifestyle, but we need to know that we're actually going to put action behind our faith. I think in Christianity, they just say it straight up, like faith without works is dead. And the Buddha would say an unverified faith, I think in Buddhism you'd say faith without practice is dead. Because practice is where we find out for ourselves. And this is what differentiates dharma from dogma, is that finding out for yourself. And the Buddha in Pali, it said ehipassiko. And that basically means check it out for yourself. So that's why we practice. It's not that you come here and we just sit down and say, here's 10 Buddhist teachings, now just believe it and go on your way. We start with practice, and then we encourage you when you go home to keep practicing. In fact, you're just here to kind of, remember, and then really all of our practice is what we go home and we do every day. And so, the Buddha actually, some of his early teachers had said to him, just believe this thing. And he left them. He actually said, like, this is not for me. If you're just saying, just believe it. And later, after he went through his realizations and was sharing them, and when he was asked, on what authority do you share these teachings? He said, my own experience. That's the authority, is my own experience. Now, what he had done was he got to know his mind deeply. And we're going to talk about that, about what do you actually believe in your mind. But what he said is, yes, personal authority. So you can ask yourself and look at your practice, what am I doing to verify my faith? What am I feel like I believe in something. I believe something's possible. Maybe it's that I do have Buddha nature. Like maybe I do have a sense that there's something beyond how my, the conventional, the common mind works. And then what am I doing to verify it? Because that's the majority of the teachings is us practicing and exploring. You could call it researching, researching in our everyday life what is actually true.
Yeah. So what we mostly wanted to emphasize today is the aspect of the research. Like you don't need to believe anything. There's no dogma in Buddhism. There's a little faith that will start the practice, but the reasoning and the experiencing in yourself, that is the what's going to lead you to the real opening and truth. So I want to read as Nagarjuna, which was a Tibetan Buddhist scholar, well summed up faith's importance in the beginning of the spiritual quest, just the beginning, and its contrast with wisdom, his status. One associates with the dharma out of faith, so the first approach, but one knows truly out of understanding. So how he emphasizes understanding. Understanding is the chief of the two, okay? But faith precedes. So faith is only, okay, I'm getting into that, but then forget about faith and just trust by, try it by yourself and understand. So I guess we're kind of running a little bit.
Maybe I want to say the one thing about doubt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk for a moment about doubt and its use, because really you could think of doubt as the opposite of faith. And we all know that we can get really lost in doubt and in our own self-doubt, in doubt in the possibility of these teachings, of so many things, right? We actually in the West are really well developed in the cynical mind, and that can work against us. Now, the Buddha taught that doubt has its place. And like I was saying, he's saying, check it out for yourself. So in the Sandaka Sutta, he actually cautioned and said, don't follow authority, tradition, reasoning, and logic. Wow, that's a hard one for us.
Whoops. Yes, thank
Jungle
you.
sounds. That was fun.
Sorry.
Reasoning and logic. I mean, that's what we depend on, most of us, most of the time. Or respecting teachers just because they say that they're your teachers. Because he said all of those things, like going on all of those things, can be driven by our own greed, hatred, and delusion. And really, we can think of that. How is it we want to believe something, or because someone said it, or because we're used to it, and we're not actually employing the faculty of the awake mind to really say, is that really true? And there's some great teachings on this, but he also taught that same kind of question where something comes from and explore yourself to our own minds. Because our own minds want to get lost in self-doubt. Our mind, it's almost like it works. It's like in competition with our own Buddha nature. That small sense of self is fighting against its own Buddha nature, and it will get lost in analyzing, in cynicism, in doubt, in bias. Right? In bias against ourselves and against others. And so the Buddha really cautioned and said, you can't even rely on what you think of as common sense, because your understanding of reality is so limited. And so you actually need to wake up and penetrate your own mind. Don't believe others, but also don't believe your own mind. You have to work hard. And this doesn't mean it's going to be so painful. But like Tere said, actually poking those holes in the igloo, it does take dedication. And that's when we come back to getting inspiration. But to know that it takes a certain faith and a certain dedication of effort to wake up and to really see what is true. And the Buddha did say, he said, who is your enemy? Mind is your enemy. No one can harm you more. No one outside of you can harm you more than your own mind untrained. And at the same time, who is your friend? Mind is your friend, because nothing can help you more than a trained mind, not even your most loving parents. And so this is what he's pointing us towards. When we learn to practice and engage and actually really look at what could we truly have faith in and find out through direct experience, then our mind can be our friend, because then we're in relationship with reality, the truth of reality as it is.
Yeah, beautiful. Do we want to finish with this
Oh, your poem. Yeah,
humorous?
yeah.
I didn't bring my glasses, so do you want to read it?
Which one is it here? This one?
This one.
Okay. um, Terry brought this
No,
book over.
don't
I love
say anything.
Okay.
Just read it.
This is. I think when she read this to me, I thought this is such a great challenge your mind. Okay, it's called "Walking Through a Wall" by Lewis Jenkins. Unlike flying or astral projection, walking through walls is a totally Earth-related craft, but a lot more interesting than pot making or driftwood lamps. I got started at a picnic up in Bowstring in the northeast part of the state. A fellow walked through a brick wall right there in the park. I said, "Say, I want to try that." He had a little bit of bright faith. Stone walls are best, then brick and wood. Wooden walls with fiberglass insulation and steel doors, not so good. They won't hurt you. If your wall walking is done properly, both you and the wall are left intact. It is just that they aren't pleasant somehow. The worst things are wire fences. Maybe it's the molecular structure of the alloy or just the amount of give in a fence. I don't know, but I've torn my jacket and lost my hat in a lot of fences. The best approach to a wall is, first, 2 hands placed flat against the surface. It's a matter of concentration and just the right pressure. You will feel the dry, cool inner wall with your fingers. Then there is the moment of total darkness before you step through on the other side.
We don't try to pretend you will believe we can cross walls. It was meant as a humorous ending, so you can
But
laugh.
you never know.
So, we'd like you guys to explore a little bit about faith in your own experience. So, we're going to go into triads, threes. I think so. If you feel comfortable working with the people you came with, if you want to explore other people's, beliefs or thoughts, move from another to another setting of chairs, and just find yourselves groups of threes, and we'll guide you.
So just raise your hand if you need a triad, and you can look and find the people around you with raised hands. If you end up in a group of 2, that's fine. Again, just raise your hand if you need anyone. You can introduce yourselves. Maybe if you could also break into a group of 2, groups of
Yes.
2. If you're maybe someone from this group wants to break out with, yeah, there we go. Okay, with Kenny.
Kenny, yeah.
So I'm going to give you the first question, and you're going to have about a minute per person to reflect on this, what your answer is. The first question is, do you have faith in your own Buddha nature? And, this can actually be vulnerable. The answer might be no. Or sometimes, I'm not sure. Or some days, yes, and some days I just don't believe it at all. So whatever is true for you, do you have faith in your own Buddha nature? So, yes. Good question.
Yeah.
So Buddha nature is basically what the Buddha showed us, that the mind has a possibility of waking up and knowing that it's beyond like being stuck in our thoughts and suffering, but that it can, those moments in meditation where we can just see what's happening, that we're not our mind, we're not our thoughts in that kind of common way. That is Buddha nature, that our heart and our mind can be awake and can see the nature of reality as it is.
In another way, I would say what I used to believe, and I don't mean, you don't need to believe on a God, like we can still believe in God and follow a religion and still follow the Buddhist path, is that that what we used to place on the outside, the God, the heaven, that you truly believe you can find inside yourself. The liberation, the freedom, the peace, the openness, the open-hearted, the connection, the kindness. That's the Buddha nature. So choose who would be the first person, maybe the one wearing glasses, and if not, then then the one wearing the darker socks, the darkest socks. Okay, and then go. Yeah, and then the two other people are going to listen. Maybe listen with your bodies, not with your thinking mind. Okay, and will time for you. You want to ring the bell? Start with a bell.
We're doing really good. I think
It's
we're good.
10:18.
Because it's such a small group, I think we can do not so much Q&A. We can just do this and then just a few questions at the end.
Questions would be better because we might have created some doubts. 5 seconds.
Move to the next person. I think the poem was actually a great ending.
Yeah? Okay. People were like, what?
I think my experience is that a lot of in Dharma crowds, they're not very expressive of how things impact them. So I don't know. It will be interesting to see what they think. Move to the next person. So what do you think? We'll do one more question, one more of these, and then come back? Or do you want to have them come back right away?
Let's them come back and question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
What was the other question?
What do you need in order to strengthen your faith?
And the other one?
Those were the only two that we wrote down. Like, what do you need to verify was what do you need? Yeah.
No.
Bring it back. Yeah, bring it back. And wrap up. And then bring your attention back up this way. We have just a few minutes left, but we actually wanted to give you an opportunity to bring any questions that came up back here to the group. If there were questions that came up in your triad, or also in your meditation and in listening to the talk this morning, the dialogue between Tere and I, of what are your questions about faith? You know, faith in the Dharma context, about verifying your faith. working with the mind. What questions do you have? Yeah.
I think my question would be about letting go of expectation while still maintaining faith.
That is great. Maybe I'll start and then Terry can hop in. It's a real balance, right? Because the Buddha cautioned us against grasping after things, which sometimes it feels like an edge between having an aspiration and then constantly judging ourselves against it. I don't know if this is true, but someone told me, I think Jack Kornfield told me the story once about the Dalai Lama, where someone said, how important is assessing your practice? And he said, oh yeah, assessing your practice is very, very important. I do it about once every 20 years. And it's that big view of things, right? Because we can become so microscopic of like, am I doing it now? Am I doing it now? Am I awake now? Is my mind working now? And it's like we basically just pound that thing to death until, there's not actually room for the faith to inspire us. And so the Buddha constantly talked about relaxation and effort and in balance. And it's actually just something that we have to inquire about in ourselves. Like, am I aspiring, and am I also relaxing? And that's in everyday life we can see that. Like, am I actually challenging myself, and am I also accepting myself? And you can make that whole inquiry a practice of noticing.
I just wanted to thank you for this format, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the triads, and just this whole concept of faith was wonderful, so thank you.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more.
So it's interesting having what I'd say is an empirical practice, which is, do it, sit on the mat, versus faith, which seems like it's in the mind. And marrying those and seeing how they complement versus contradict one another is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good observation.
So one thing I'd ask you to look at is what got you to the mat? That there was something, I don't know if you just walked along one day and found a mat and sat down, but there was probably something that inspired you. Maybe something you read or someone you saw, or like a sense that something was possible. That's faith. The thing that got you to sit down, and then you're really the verification when you call it empirical, so that would be the verification. But it can be helpful to notice that, you do have faith, but you might not always see it as that. Does that make sense? Yeah. And you could even look at your own practice. If you ever feel like your practice becomes kind of dry, or like, I'm just very rationally doing my practice, is to go back and say, what actually inspired me to do this? Or what would inspire me to continue? Mm-hmm. Jasmine?
I guess if you were to describe some synonyms for faith, what would you use? Because I feel like there's such a fine line between faith, like, are we referring to our beliefs? Are we referring to like intrinsic motivation? And then obviously religion. And so I think like semantics is kind of starts to trip me up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that of course faith is associated with religion, like in this cultural context, and of maybe being stubborn and believing things that are not easily you cannot easily check them out. So that's why faith is not mentioned a lot in this tradition, because people associate with that. But I would say that faith, the way we see it in Buddhism, is all you said. It's first is in inspiration, motivation to go and sit in the cushion, is trust that something else other than my constricted mind is possible. It's not the contents of my mind, it's the container of, like, this big container of my mind. Maybe I kind of grasp a little bit. It's energy to keep going. It's patience, because we know we're gonna get there. So it's all these qualities. That is faith in Buddhism.
you.
It's and contrasting with belief. Belief doesn't question and doesn't lead to action.
I'll just add one thing. Openness to possibility. You're open to the possibility that there's something more, something deeper, something beyond what you already know. That would be a sense of faith in that possibility. And curiosity could come out of that. Like, then you become curious about what is that possibility for you. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've
Time?
got time. One quick more and then.
Just very quickly, Roger Housden, who's one of my favorite authors, wrote a book called Keeping the Faith Without a Religion. I love that book, and he talks about beauty and just having faith in the nature of how life progresses with synchronicity. So he talks about what could you have faith in if you weren't into dogma. But just a beautiful book and a beautiful author.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful recommendation.
So just done.
Yeah. So of those of you who've been here before, which seems like pretty much everyone except Todd, welcome. The teachings that Tere and I and everyone here offer are based on what we call dana in the Buddhist tradition. And dana translates to generosity, meaning we're here, we're generously bringing our teachings, our time. We do it for free. We don't get paid for doing this, and this space is provided for us to do it in. And so, in turn, we ask that if you were moved by the teachings, that you can also respond with generosity, and whatever you feel that you want to offer. There is a basket that's by the door. I believe that's right. Is that right?
Two bowls.
Yeah,
It's on the
right
table.
there. And you can just put in whatever you feel moved to offer for the teachings.
And
So.
online, they have a button online.
Oh, and a button online. And so there is, are we online right now? But if you're online, there is a button online, and you can just donate through that button. You can offer your own generosity that way.
Could be also your time as volunteer, whatever. So generosity from our part, from your part, from everybody's. That's what make all this possible.
Great.
Thank you very much for sharing with us
One thing I
your
wanted
time.
to add too is, like, a lot of people sign up to come here now because of our attendance. We could only have like 49 or 50 people, but I want people to know, and know people online, that when you go to sign up, it says to pay, and if you're not sure what you want to pay, or you want to pay when you get here, just put in 0 and then come, and you can pay when you're here. We just want to know the amount of people, because some people have not attended because they thought I got to pay online. I'm not sure if I'm going or anything, so it's changing our attendance. So I want people to know, and we're going to change some of that verbiage online.
Yeah,
great.
So just put down that you're coming, put a 0 and pay when you get here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks,
Have
everyone.
a great Sunday. If anyone has